Of late, I might often be found drawing whilst listening to J.R.R. Tolkien's The Silmarillion.
There was Eru, the One.
Adding to my repertoire of Tolkien-experienced books, which number now 5, consisting of The Hobbit, The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, The Return of the King, and now The Silmarillion. What I discovered was what I initially perceived to be a labyrinth metaphor for Christianity, and considering Tolkien was a practicing Catholic, it's not unfathomable thought that his faith would have a hand in his writing.
Are you in fact a theist?
Oh, I'm a Roman Catholic.
Those familiar with Tolkien as an author, however, are aware that he had a great disdain for symbolism.
I don't work in symbols at all. Other people can find that they are symbolic. There may be symbols in my mind, but they're not symbols to me in my conscious mind at all.
Yet also would make an important distinction between allegory and an application.
People do not fully understand the difference between an allegory and an application. You can go to a Shakespeare play and you can apply it to things in your mind if you like, but they're not allegories.
In a letter to his son, Michael Tolkien, he wrote, "So it may be said that the chief purpose of life for any one of us is to increase, according to our capacity, our knowledge of God by all means that we have, and to move by it to praise and thanks." An odd thing it would be for one with such a belief to make their life's work a story which exists only for itself. That's why it's not the case. Tolkien's world provides an application by which we might better understand our own world. What follows are the four most compelling pieces of the Silmarillion, which doubtless will cause you to consider differently the world which you perceive with your own eyes. Tolkien's secondary world, in which the Lord of the Rings narrative exists in small part, is a monotheistic world as is ours. The god of the world is known by many names: the One, Eru Ilúvatar, and Eru Ilúvatar. Upon speaking, Eru Ilúvatar will conclude his commands by saying, "I am Eru Ilúvatar." His name is credibility enough. The God of Abraham speaks in like fashion. Repeatedly in Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, as law fills the pages, God will end his words by saying, "I am the Lord your God." Famously in speaking with Moses from the burning bush, God said to Moses, "I am who I am." On this small scale, it becomes perfectly rational that Ilúvatar's name would be reason enough to justify any of his choices. As in our world, the giver and taker of all things need not explain his commands as though their legitimacy depended on man's opinion of them. When Eru creates Arda, he permits the Valar to enter it. Creation is referred to as the music. Similarly, in C.S. Lewis's The Magician's Nephew, Aslan creates the world using song. A most peculiar thing indeed is music. Where exactly does it come from? Like laughter, music is an ability only born into humans. One may never learn an instrument, but in all are the instinctive ability to create a beat using their hands and to sing notes with their voice, having never studied the concept. As humans alone are granted the gift of song, parallelly in Tolkien's world are only the children of Eru Ilúvatar given the gift of song. Music in the most critical capacity can only be guessed to be a divine gift from God. The Valar are bound by the music, Eru Ilúvatar's creation. The Valar themselves are spirits not bound by any law save the will of Eru Ilúvatar, but upon entering the music they become bound by its rules, namely they're bound by time, and were made to take female or male form which they were not before. The Valar take upon them forms, some as of male, some as of female, for that difference of temper they had even from the beginning. In the world one must be bound by its rules, whilst those outside of it move freely about. The origins of Tolkien's universe provides a new application by which we might view our own world. Eternity is impossible to grasp. How has God existed forever, since the beginning of time? Even in our wildest science fiction stories, creators can only conceive of moving about time freely in a time machine. But like Eru Ilúvatar, God is simply not bound by time, like he is not bound by physics or anatomy. He always was, and was not this way for a short time or a long time, for time's very principles do not hold him. 2 Dark Lords there are in the world over the course of the 3 ages in the Silmarillion. Melkor, known among the Valar, and Morgoth, known among elves and men, is the single most powerful spirit in existence save only Eru Ilúvatar, and chiefest of Morgoth's servants was Sauron. Many a similarity is shared between these Dark Lords and Satan. Sauron is discovered to be a shapeshifter, in simple terms. His spirit can take on different forms. At a time, he takes the form of a wolf, a vampire, a fair man, and his dark, terrible form. In The Lord of the Rings, because he is separated from the ring, his spirit resides in Barad-dûr. Consider this quote from Billy Graham on the appearance of the wicked foe. The Bible doesn't tell us what Satan looks like, and with good reason, for he's not limited to any physical form or image. By the time of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, Morgoth had been defeated, but his spirit cannot actually be killed. The Valar have imprisoned him in the deepest places until the end of all things for the Ilúvatar to judge. And once Sauron is defeated at the end of the Third Age, he also doesn't actually die. His spirit becomes too weak to ever again take physical form. Morgoth in the Silmarillion is a master of deception. He would lie to his enemies and his allies in the pursuit of accomplishing his will. The Silmarils are jewels crafted by one of the elves of the First Age, Feanor. The Silmarils would be lost to the world by the time of the Third Age. But they were beautiful jewels, even more attractive than the Arkenstone of Erebor. Morgoth in the First Age deceives Feanor and convinces him that the Valar desire the Silmarils for themselves. Feanor perceived that Morgoth wanted the Silmarils and saw through his lie. Feanor cursed him, but even as he cast him out, he believed his lie that the Valar were evil. Tolkien's friend and similarly legendary writer C.S. Lewis was an atheist in his early life, and Tolkien's influence was one of the reasons C.S. Lewis would become Roman Catholic. Satan is indeed the great deceiver, and would love nothing more for you to deny his existence. For in doing so, you deny God's existence also. Reading The Silmarillion for me shed new light on the question, what is the purpose of life? Fortunately, I needn't theorize as to Tolkien's view, as he answered the question himself. Before The Hobbit would become a Hollywood blockbuster, before it was a best-selling book, and before it was even published, J.R.R. Tolkien shared drafts of the book with a select number of people, C.S. Lewis for one, and another was a 10-year-old boy named Rainer Unwin. Rainer had grown, and his daughter Camilla was assigned in school to answer the question, what is the purpose of life? To this, Tolkien would write to her in 1969, around 4 years before his death. If you do not believe in a personal God, the question, what is the purpose of life, is unaskable and unanswerable. To whom or what would you address the question? If life were not a gift given, no one could be asked the purpose of the giving. J.R.R. Tolkien's masterpiece is not some metaphor designed to lure fantasy enthusiasts to Christ. So why did someone who wrote that the meaning of life was to praise and thank God make his life's work something that was in no way an allegory for Christianity? The answer? It doesn't need to be an allegory to bring praise and thanks to God. Tolkien's books are the greatest pieces of fiction ever written. They bring elation to those who read them.
And you're right, I often think of Bag End. I miss my books. And my armchair, my garden.
I found it is the small things, everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keeps the darkness at bay.
Go back to your books and your armchair. Plant your trees. Watch them grow.
Well, I think it's a very basic appeal, because everybody likes a fantasy. They like to escape from life when it becomes dull and boring. And you can get this kind of escape through detective thrillers and science fiction stories and spy stories. But you always come back to the real world, thinking that it's even duller and more boring than it was before. And you think, I wish I was the first man on the moon, or I wish I was a spy instead of leading the kind of life I'm leading. Whereas when you finish reading The Lord of the Rings, not only have you had a marvellous adventure story and a marvellous fantasy, but some of the magic has rubbed off on the ordinary, very homely things of life, like a good meal.
After reading Tolkien's books, what other conclusion might you come to, other than to offer praise and thanks for this blessing? Gratitude indeed is owed to Tolkien, but greater praise still to his creator. At one time or another, everyone watching this video has felt purposeless. To such individuals, I would today recommend that you find joy in something small, some delicious food, a delightful book, or one of my favorites, good company. And proceeding such, move by this blessing to praise and thanks.